So it's a matter of finding that balance of stepping into these uncertain environments, knowing it's going to be hard, taking that hit, getting that cortisol blast, pivoting. You're hypersensitive, you're focused, you're ready to make decisions, you're good to go. But then you back off a little bit and get little minor victories along the way, so that then when, after you've done the work, after you've put those miles in, now comes the payoff. And now you get that nice ebb and flow of all those categories. You've got spikes, you've got the mitigation to put that down, and now everything's where it's supposed to be. And that's the sweet spot that we need to all seek out.
Welcome to the Founders Journey Podcast. I'm Greg Moran.
I'm Peter Dean. We're founders who struggle the same way every other founder does.
Our goal is to let founders tell their own stories.
Part inspiration, part knowledge and learnings from everyday founders to make your journey a bit easier.
Hey, welcome back to the Founders Journey Podcast. Today with my co-host, Peter Dean. What's going on, Peter? How are you?
How's it going?
Doing good. Peter's coming from Saratoga Springs, and I'm coming from beautiful Livingston, Montana. And we've got a great guest today who this is going to be a lot of fun. That our guest today on the podcast. This Jeff Evans is our guest, so I'll introduce Jeff in a second. But Peter and I have had this list of guests recently that has made us feel like we're pretty active guys, but has made us feel like we're one step above a sloth. And Jeff is definitely at the top of that list that has really done some remarkable things, both athletically and in the world of climbing, and also in the world of leadership. So really my privilege today to have Jeff Evans with us. Jeff is a guide in the truest sense of the word. He's been at it for about 25 years as an expedition leader and a guide. He's led expeditions around the globe. He's faced incredible challenges. We'll start to get into some of those today. A lot of fun. He is often alongside of really remarkable individuals like himself, like Eric Weirminer, who I think people probably have seen before or heard of as the only climb Mount Everest blind, and Jeff was his guide. Jeff's summited Everest. He's been in the intense world of reality TV with Expedition Impossible, and I think most importantly, he's the co-founder and expedition leader for the No Barriers Warriors program, which really supports injured veterans. So recent years, Jeff has really shifted over. The expedition side is taking him on a real leadership journey. And we'll be talking about that today, and really his commitment to selfless leadership, teamwork, trust, and adversity management. I think for startup founders, for leaders, really a remarkable guy. So Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, guys. Hey, thanks for having me. Even though Greg and I are, I could hit probably like 4 tee shots to get to his house. You're in a different state right now, so.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot. I know you don't actually include this in your bio, Jeff, but I did forget to mention that Jeff is my neighbor. Also, which
I have to say that was the best intro Greg given, just to date.
Why? Because usually it
that was
sucks.
Definitely the best one.
yeah.
No, he just.
Good job, Greg.
That was the
5
best
stars.
one. He's usually like, "Hey, I'll let you introduce yourself."
Well, he's introduced me to probably 5 or 6 different audiences, so now he's got it down. He's done it a few times.
Yeah,
he knows the entire CV at this point. So
that's right.
I was there twice
Jeff,
for him, so I was lucky that I was invited.
Yeah,
Even
Jeff.
though I didn't work for the company.
What I didn't say in Jeff's presentation is, or Jeff's intro, is he does a ton of keynote speaking these days on, for a lot of the reasons that we'll be talking about today, and Jeff has spoken to different companies in our the Evergreen Mountain portfolio and in my background a lot. Because just every time it's just an amazing experience to people for people to really hear that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that'll be that's just always a nice thing to talk about. Is everybody generally hears the introduction and they're like, "Oh, mountain climber, bro," like cool little stories about these harrowing feats and so forth. But the reality is, my job, and if I do my job effectively when it comes to sharing messages and talking, is like, hey, these stories run deep within all of us, and it's a part of everyone's journey. And I would even, take it as far as, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not talking about North America. Go to Africa, go to Iceland, go to anywhere. And it's the human condition. And the human condition is fraught with, with steep slopes and big storms and, gentle, easy, cruisy, trekky days, followed by getting your ass kicked, followed by waking up and the sun's out, followed by a huge, it's that's something I've realized is just connecting the dots over the years. Is there's just a lot of metaphorical significance to, from the things that I've done just because they're fun, and things that I've done with people that I thought were cool, to holy shit, this is real life. This is real life, and that's why I think it's really easily digestible for folks, thematically.
Totally. The relationship or the parallel between, I think, the expeditions, mountain climbing, things like that, and so much of what this podcast is, obviously we're focused on company founders, right, who are on this journey of, so much, I think, of launching a startup and navigating through those dark days, followed by exactly what you said, right? The days of, like, there's the good ones, the days where you feel like, hey, I'm actually getting somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Metaphorically, literally, like something is happening. And then you just get the days where it's like, somebody just punched you in the fucking head with a brick in their hand, right? And that's so much of that journey. And I think that parallels, that's why I love that the stories that you tell really about these expeditions you've been on, and the climbing of the summits and things like that. But so much of it is not about, and you talk about this a lot, it's not about the summit, right? It's not about, like, hey, can I march my way up to the top of Everest as fast as possible? But it's about that journey, right?
No, and it's when I think about that these days, and I hear about, you hear about folks that pay $100,000 and go climb Everest, and they didn't really they didn't do the apprenticeship. They didn't spend the decades doing it. And once again, that's just another good metaphor. And those are the people that tend to get in a lot of trouble because in the world that you work out with startups and folks really taking chances, as the gray hair populates us, with every gray hair comes another experience where we realize, like, I need to do more of that and less of that. And when you don't have as many gray hairs, right, you tend to make these mistakes. And same thing with climbing, is if you haven't put in that, you don't have enough gray hairs, when things go south, you don't really have much to lean on, right? When it's dark and your hands aren't working and your brain is really just kind of stewed up and your decision-making skills are muted in a lot of ways, what do you have to rely on is instincts. And instincts, experience, and experience is obviously based on making mistakes, right? That's what experience really is. And I think that, I pay $100,000, go up there, make some mistakes, and then be like, I really don't know. I don't know how to manage this moment, because I've never been in a moment like this before. And I feel like there's a lot of parallels with what you've done. I know that there's plenty of stories about, startup folks who are in their 20s. As a matter of fact, I've met some of them through you guys, and they're successful, right? And there's plenty of stories and anecdotal experiences about guys and gals doing that. But I think you two would probably say, and many other folks, is that, the incidence of success when you're in your 20s and you started out is a little bit low, right? But then you start to really sort of figure out the recipe as time goes on, and that falls into that whole metaphor of, listen, if we just want to stand on top, you're missing the whole point. You're missing the entire point of what it means to go knuckle down for a month or 6 weeks or 2 months to try to do, or in your case, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years to do one thing. You're missing the point. So more importantly, understand that each step creates an opportunity to be better the next step and prepared for when shit goes sideways.
How do you coach somebody through that, Jeff? Like, there's always this, I think in this startup world, right? There's always this mindset, especially when you look at like tech startups, of how fast can I make it to the exit, right? How quickly can I build this business and somebody's going to come along and give me a big payday? And that's that same metaphor that you really talk about all the time with really the journey is on the flank of the mountain, right? Not the summit. How do you dial somebody back from that kind of summit fever, right? Of saying like, no, I'm just going to charge my ass up that mountain as fast as I possibly can.
Well, I could do the whole like get off my lawn like old guy thing and just be like, listen, that because I've got an 18-year-old, so I know that patience is something you don't have until you, once again, have acquired some seasoning, so to speak. So, I don't. I was just as prone to that, I think, as any of us were. You just want that instant gratification. You want to be in a position of payout. You want that moment that you've worked hard for to be instantaneous. And it's cliche to say that, that's once again, it's like standing on top of the mountain. How do I coach somebody to do that? There's really, I think that, being a parent can really show you that you can talk to your blue in the face about being patient and really doing, putting in the hard work and understanding that there will be a payoff, but it won't be sudden. All the good things worth doing suck a little bit, right? That's the truth of it. Like anything worth doing hurts a little bit. And
in many ways.
And if it doesn't hurt a little bit, or if it doesn't suck a little bit, then it's probably not worth doing, right? So I think that if I could say to anybody, and I think mountain climbing and all the hundreds, if not, thousands of people that I've guided on mountains over the years they've all understood that, whether by necessity or by default or just through this process, is that if you're standing at the base of Mount Everest and you look up at it, it's overwhelming and it's hard to imagine standing up there and what it's going to take to get from there. It's the whole how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time thing. There's no other way to break it up. And I think that if I were to try and use metaphors as a coaching instrument, that it would be simply that, is that, I could take a helicopter and I could have someone drop me off on the summit, and I'll summit all right, you bet, but I will be dead. Right. I mean, literally, like I will die within 2 minutes, and I will achieve this summit. And, then I'll come down and I won't have learned anything. So, I spent 5 years guiding on Denali in the Alaska range, and also did 2 seasons of search and rescue up there for the national park. And I'd summited Denali twice, and I was doing a cleanup with a helicopter pilot. We went up in this pretty dicey little couloir for 5 days and cleaned up all the fixed ropes and all the crap and brought it down. And we created this huge ball of nylon fixed ropes and gear and crap and stuff that was all up in there. Set it up in a ball, climbed back down. About 3 days later, we went up with the helicopter pilot and we did a long line pull in where he dropped us off, and then he picked up with this hydraulic grabber onto the helicopter, picked up this ball of crap, and then flew it and dropped it back down. And then he picked me back up. At that point, I was by myself. So you hang underneath, 100 feet underneath the helicopter, and you're connected on this rope with this thing called the God ring. Because that was it. That was everything. You're connected, and it was this big metal circle. It was tied into the rope, and you clip in with a daisy chain. And he picked me up, and we were flying over this ridge, me underneath the helicopter, over a ridge to go to another spot, to move another bit. And I could hear him his name was Dan. And at that point, he was infamous for being the most, having the most hours in a helicopter than any human being on the planet. Because he was in Vietnam, and the dude was just an absolute unit badass dude. He didn't say much. He didn't talk much. You figure that kind of guy probably doesn't. He doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's that guy. And so he goes, I think he was like, Evans, how many times you summited this thing? And I was like, twice. And he goes, want to make it 3? And I was like, okay. And this is while we were flying. So this is while
you're hanging 100 feet below the thing?
Yes. And then he starts circling and circling and circling and going up in like 20 minutes. And then he goes up and he touches my feet down onto the summit of Denali, onto the helicopter, and then flies away. Wow. Did I summit Denali 3 times? No. I only summited twice. So
you touched it 3 times.
Yeah, I touched the top 3 times, but I only summited once because, that was a pretty exciting little go, but I don't count that one. And that's a long way of telling a short story of that doesn't count, man. You know, like you gotta work, get your ass kicked, put in the work, and then there's the payoff. So
that's a great story. I've actually never heard you tell that before. So if you think about, through all the stuff you've done, right, all the adventures you've been on, I mean, what is that? Is there one thing, is there one moment that you can point back to and say, like, this is the thing that really influenced me more than, or really, if you think about it now, influenced your approach to leadership and guiding others in the context you do it now?
Before you answer that, I want to tell you this funny story because I've listened to you twice, and then I was at FedEx corporate life before I did the startup stuff, and there's this leadership thing we were doing, and they put me got partnered up, and I had to walk someone around that was blindfolded, take him to lunch, and then come back, and I just laughed because that was an exercise they did to me, but you did this. Your exercise was a lot longer, and I just thought it was so ironic.
So look, Peter, it's not really that much different, right? You had to take the blindfolds.
I had to more than once.
Similar experience to Jeff.
There was always like 2 or 3 of us, and we would always have to Rochambeau to see who would go shit the blind guy, right? So like we needed to, we'd be in a tent, like who's gonna go out and shit the blind guy. So we'd Rochambeau, and the loser had to be like, well, sometimes stick your head out and be like, left, right, okay, right there is good. Or,
oh my God.
Or otherwise walking. So it's really not that different, Peter. It's the same thing. Same thing, man.
It's funny. That was part of the curriculum.
All right.
Well, you probably did the Franklin Covey thing. Did you do the Franklin Covey? Yeah.
That's exactly what it was.
That's hilarious. Yeah. All right. So Peter's equally harrowing story to notwithstand. Back to my original question.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a moment where that, you think really influenced your approach? What do you think about leadership today?
God, I mean, I don't know. I can't really think of a moment or an event because it was, it was just such a, very similar to the spirit of what we're talking about now is it was just this collection of, different events that sort of coalesced into me learning and sort of piecing it together. Like understanding that there was this mosaic of events that really started to define who I was, both personally and professionally. And I think that there I would love to be able to tell you there was this one shining moment when it all just sort of galvanized right then. But I mean, this was decades of being responsible for people's lives, and that's a lot to, even now I think about all the times when I easily could have and probably should have killed somebody, very, very easily, like dozens and dozens of times of making mistakes, and people's lives are really at, up in limbo and not in that moment because of my decision making.
Yep.
There was an event though that underscored that, I think, and I think showcased to me, how profound my decision making was, and how much of an impact it had. So one time I guided Kilimanjaro, I think 13 times or something like that. And one of the times we were doing a summit night up a little route that's a little bit sportier than the normal route. It goes up some rock bands and up some little ramps and stuff. And there's some scrambling, like fourth class scrambling. You don't want to fall. But we're not using ropes. I mean, it's still like fourth class. And my African buddy was up in front of my group, and there was a group of Germans that were they had been practicing on the ice that day, and they had crampons and ice axes and all kinds of stuff. And I was thinking to myself, like, what are these jamokes doing? They're Germans, right? They're Germans, of course. Like, sorry. I mean, I'm sorry about, not really. So they, they were doing all their work, and I'm like, these guys. And so that night, sure enough, we got behind them, and my African buddy started following. Well, they were going to climb something icy, and we were right behind them. And before I knew it, we were traversing this slope, snowy slope that was hundreds of foot drop down, where if you fell, you'd have been, pulverized and dead within, the first few flips. And so I was like, we're off route. I knew it. I was like, this, because I'd done it once before. I was like, this is not where we should be right now. But we committed to it and went across. And then we kept following. And then we came up to another ramp, and it was another big consequential section where literally my clients were like using their hands to hold on to the ice with no crampons, like traversing across. I mean, anybody could have. And I'll tell you, man, that at night ended up being okay. No one fell, but easily someone could have fallen. No, unbelievable. It's unbelievable that no one fell and died that night. And I got down with them, 10, 12 hours later. And I just was so humbled by my mistakes, because it wasn't that my buddy followed them. It was me. I was the leader. I was the person who ultimately made the decisions, and it was going to fall on my shoulders, and I needed to be responsible for that. And man, I was just uncontrollably crying. I just couldn't help this. My emotions were just, I was so humbled and sad, but yet still happy and grateful that nothing had happened. And I'll tell you, man, I still to this moment, like, think of that night and just am so overwhelmed by my clients accepting my apology. And also, I don't think they realized. We've talked to a few of them since then, but shit was real, man. And I just, for them to forgive me and for me to sort of roll through that process, that was one of the biggest learning opportunities for me as a leader. And realizing that so many different pieces and decision making, even the butterfly effect for one decision that can be made here is going to greatly impact the trajectory of this project, of this climb, of this investment, of this startup, of what we're trying to do. So you, instead of living in fear of what could result from decision making, understanding that each action has consequences, and there is therefore the methodology and the practice and the insight and the experience and the rational decision making and the relationships that you can learn from every single juncture, and consulting with folks to say, what is your take on this decision that I'm about to make right here, to go right instead of go up? Like, what is your take on that? Coming together, communicating, and then therefore all of these great expeditionary mindset characteristics really start to come into play. Do I trust the people that are out in front of me right now, who I have delegated to be my lieutenant, right? Which is what you have to do in your world, right? Like, I can't do it all. I cannot do it all. I can't be expected to do it all, but yet it all falls on my shoulder, right? Because I'm the one making the big time decisions. So if I've got to entrust my lieutenant's going to make mistakes too. I'm going to make mistakes. So do I need to bring this person back? Do I need to consult at this juncture before we even step off? Am I really clear on what our path looks like? Am I really clear on what the summit looks like, what our time frame looks like, what our mitigation strategies look like? Am I really clear on that? And have I communicated that effectively? And I think metaphorically, that night really reinforced a lot of that to me. And that I made those mistakes, which amplified, like how to not do it.
Yeah.
I think is the answer, how to not do it, and then be grateful for when I do get it right every once in a while.
That's, and it's such an interesting, story too, right? Because that point you make at the end of it reinforced it by what not to do, right? We, so much of whether it's expeditions or it's startups or, these kind of journeys we get ourselves onto, we're all flying blind, right? And we're all going to just have those moments of just real uncertainty. Like you said, shit gets really real. And I think, to me, what always separates the great founder, the great startup leader from others is their ability to then self-analyze, right? I mean, that obviously that had a big emotional effect on you to say, but that was that self-analysis to say, a lot of people would say at that point, like, great, we made it out. That was, kind of laugh it off and be on to the next thing. But the ability to really look at that situation for what it was and say, this was legitimately a near-death experience for a lot of people. And in the startup world, it's, that near-death experience is maybe the startup dying, right? But to be able to kind of analyze that and say, what lessons can I take away from this so I don't end up doing the same exact thing again, right? And I think that so much of that, it just separates the great leader, whether in any facet from, the other person, the ability to just
in the military, there's always an AAR, after action report, right? Yeah. So it's like you go on any mission, you come back and you do an AAR. And so a lot of the work that we've done with our service members, in the Warriors program is we always have an intake. We'll have a prep in anticipation of stepping off. And then we go through very clearly, this is what the objective looks like. These are the parameters. This is what success of the mission is going to look like. And then you come back down and then have the AAR and discuss what that looks like in conjunction with before you stepped off. How different is it, right? I mean, it's never the carbon copy, right? It never goes the way you plan it. So I think if you do enough of those and you see, what the comparison is between those two, the pre and the post, I think you learn a lot about the process when you're able to really compare the pre and the post. And it's critical to do that. So a non-reflective leader is not an effective leader. Right. Oh, I just made that shit up. That was good.
I think you got to tweet that or something.
Right here. No, we'll put it. I like that. Definitely getting pulled out.
Show notes. Yeah,
that's right. We'll put that in the show notes. Yeah, for sure. The you talk a lot about, and I think you just wrote a new book on this, about the VUCA framework, right? Exactly. And around just managing adversity when you're just in that uncertainty, the complexity, the unknowns, right? And that, a lot of what you just talked about with, with the climb up Kilimanjaro is the same thing. Like, how do you, just explain the VUCA framework that you talk about, first of all.
Let me just make a parallel to startups and people starting companies and founders, just so that they understand, because Greg and I have been doing this for a while. So I'm going to an event in the next 2 days, and you read the speaker notes of this person, and they're like super successful and having the privilege, but also like we go in and we work with companies that are in a state of growth and trying to grow. From the outside, it looks like, wow, it's amazing. Everything's great. It's sunny. There's like clear skies. But when you get in these companies, there's so much like shit going on and stuff that we don't talk about that stuff. And a founder could be sitting there thinking like, my company is really effed right now. It's all messed up. It's like, but no, that's actually how it works. And this is normal to be in that state, to solve and go through that adversity to find some solution for a market. And people don't realize that. They think, oh, it's just me. I think I'm messed up. I'm not doing it right, but everything else looks good from the outside. That's the connection to kind of what you're going to talk about. Like, because no matter what you do, you're in some state of that.
Yeah.
And the shiny board report looks a little different sometimes. Right?
Once again, get off my lawn, old guy right here, but I'm going to say this is because once again, I have an 18-year-old and I know. So when I'm not sure what the incoming workforce generation is called, what the verbiage is called, but folks who are just coming into the workforce, they are imprinted with social media, and social media is always reinforcing that person's got it figured out, and that person, and that person, and that person. And the presentation is that, I've got it dialed, man. My life is just great. Everything's, but then in the reality, we are all flawed and we're all broken.
Yeah.
And we've all got fractures and lacerations. And it's just a matter of whether you address those before they become, irreparable, or they become massive scars that are going to have a hard time releasing at some point. Or if you're honest with the people around you and accept and know and acknowledge the fact that through this brokenness, through these places that we all operate in, and I know you, I see you, and we're in this together, and we're not going to have it all figured out. Let's just acknowledge that, but let's understand, just like a good marriage, a good partnership, it's like, isn't that right? My wife is right here, so I can, yeah, isn't that right? Yeah. Yeah. Just as you go through the brokenness to be able and acknowledge it and don't push it away. It is what it is. And now we've learned from it, and now we move on. I think that's something else that you learn through age and experiences. So I'm a little concerned, and would want to really get in the ear of, the incoming workforce, to your point, Peter, and just say, listen, these perceptions that we have, or this portrayal that I think a lot of folks have, whether in whatever facet it is always perhaps best foot forward and not the true representation. And that's okay. That is okay, man. Like, we need to know that it is okay to be flawed, and we need to know that it is okay to start and stop and pause and hesitate and reevaluate and not get it perfect every single step that we take. We're going to trip, we're going to fall. And so, Greg, to your point about the whole VUCA concept, VUCA stands for, it's an acronym, it stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And I did some medical missions, all kind of stacked, where I was kind of put in some really volatile situations, like for a strong period. I electively chose to go do these things, and whether I was, in a helicopter, in the Himalayas, or in a combat theater in Mosul, Iraq, there was undoubtedly like lots of moving parts, lots of variables that changed, and then the variable would change, and then the variable of the changed variable would change, all within just a split second. And I like that. I thrive in that, and I feel like a lot of people who would listen to your podcast, you probably thrive in that environment. But we need to be prepared to be able to manage the effects of that. So here's one thing that I think of. Some of us, including you and probably many of your listeners, we look for challenges, right? We like challenges. We like things that are tough, that aren't guaranteed. But what we need to be careful of is living in that environment for too long, right? Because from a hormonal perspective, we get these catecholamines, right, which flood through our body all the time. And things like cortisol, which is very beneficial in the short term. It kept us from getting eaten by lions and saber-toothed tigers and shit like that back in the day. We get these spikes of cortisol, fight or flight. Like we stay alive or we get dead. So cortisol, good short term, but for those of us who seek out these sort of spooky environments or challenging environments, we can have this ebb and flow, this like smoldering cortisol, catecholamine. And boy, that's not good, right? So we have to be careful to pump the brakes on those of us who love to go into these volatile environments. That's what I've found, is that for years, I just had to be scared. I just needed to be scared a lot. I needed to be challenged a lot. And so there was this constant state of cortisol. Well, now what I like to do is sort of, I'm going to be in control of the cortisol, right? So those volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environments, I still like those things. I still want to go into those things. And I like being at the mercy of the environment around me, so that I can then pivot and make decisions to keep me alive. Now realize that I also like dopamine and serotonin too. Those catecholamines feel pretty good as well, right? So I like to be rewarded, and I think we all do. And that's, to your point, Greg, is like, oh, you want to fight really hard and then all of a sudden get that payoff, and then you get that dopamine hit. Look what we did. And you're not really getting those cortisol blasts. You're not being challenged enough. So now it's just the payoff. No, that's not where it's at. So it's a matter of finding that balance of stepping into these uncertain environments, knowing it's going to be hard, taking that hit, getting that cortisol blast, pivoting. You're hypersensitive, you're focused, you're ready to make decisions, you're good to go. But then you back off a little bit and get little minor victories along the way, so that then when, after you've done the work, after you've put those miles in, now comes the payoff. And now you get that nice ebb and flow of all those catecholamines. You've got spikes, you've got the mitigation to put that down, and now everything's where it's supposed to be. And that's the sweet spot that we need to all seek out.
Yep.
And so are you talking about, like, you need, like, those milestones to get that big payoff need to be something that is you sitting back and saying that is a success, like we did it, so like we have to feel like we made it, not just waiting for this big summit,
exactly,
so to speak. And what you're saying, like,
yeah. So for instance, like a day in the mountains, like, we're not going to look at the summit today. You know what our goal is today is to get to this point, and then to get to this point, and then to get to camp. That's our success. That's
be like, we're there. We got there. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Be proud of it, right?
I just had I had a pre-event call with some folks I'm doing an event for next week in the mortgage industry business, and they've been having a hard time, right? Because interest rates are crazy high right now. It's a tough place to live, and so we talked about this exact topic this morning. Was, listen, right now they're in the storm, but they know. It was Fat Tuesday like last year, 2 years ago.
Yeah,
they were just like, woo. Now, oh man, okay. Now so now what do you do? How do you balance out the really the pretty sunk in moment that we're in right now, understanding where you've been, understanding where you're gonna go, but still hanging on right now. And I didn't talk about the catecholamine thing, but that's really it. It's like finding that balance of the success, the small successes that get to camp 2, get to camp 3. And then if you piece enough of those along, now we're where we need to be. And now the summit's in sight. Now the storm is cleared a bit, and now here we are. So it's a matter of finding that sweet Goldilocks zone, right?
That ties back to what you were saying before about you touched Denali's summit, but you didn't really do it because you need all of those steps to get to there to make it real and make that experience valuable. Yeah. Because it's not just about the exit, it's about the learnings to get to that exit, because that's the journey we're on. And if you're not on that journey, you're never going to make it. Like you won't make it to the first camp if your only thing you care about is being on the top.
Yeah. It's such a big message especially for younger folks that are coming into the workforce. Like, listen, it is not that. It is not that. That's the piece of advice, would be like, you have to be able to put those miles in, to step across this terrain and to trip and fall and to have storms come and go before you can really truly find that sweet zone that you need to find. And you will appreciate that summit in a far more profound way once you get there, assuming you're willing to put those miles in to get to that point.
Want to just in our kind of remaining minutes here, Jeff, I want to talk a little bit about, I think it's, I've heard you talk about teamwork, communication so much, right? And the concept of the rope line, right? And, and that concept of kind of tying into each other as a team, right? And it's something that's obviously part of climbing, but I think, when you're looking at a startup, one of the things I think that you see some founders, not all, struggle with is that concept of, they're tying off to people, but that rope line looks a lot more like one guy at the front and a bunch of people just getting dragged behind them, right? And, can you talk about that concept a
That's
little
not
bit?
leadership, right?
No, it's just one guy brute forcing his way through, right? And
you're not going to make it.
Right. Can you talk about that concept a little bit of the...
All right. So I'll start with a caveat with that. There have been times when it has been full blown storm, barely able to see, and I've got 3 people on my rope and I'm having to go into the storm and lead the way.
Yeah.
Right. Because everybody else is cowered down and just kind of following that rope. So there are times when, as a leader, that is necessary. I can count dozens of times where that's happened, where everybody's like, what the? And I'm like knuckling down because I know where that is. And I know that we have to go forward. There have been other times when I've had to say, in spite of what my clients want, we are retreating right now. And we're going to go back and lick our wounds and move forward. So, but otherwise, that's the one caveat with that. And that, once again,
that's actually a really important thing, because what you said has to happen in business too. Like sometimes you just have to do that because there's that chaos level is so high, right? And then we got to get through, and someone's got to take it and do that.
Well,
right?
And that's why I wanted
person in front.
That's why I wanted to put that metaphorically in there, is that it's not always like, hey bro, how you feeling? How you doing? Like that's really good. That's important. But there are times, and I've had it happen many times, where I'm just like, we're knuckling down and we're going, and I'm going to show you the way. And this is the way to do it. Right. So that aside, there is definitely more times than that. There are plenty of situations where if that will not work, that approach will not work, because, I think that for, let me just break it down once again, metaphorically. When you're on a rope and you're clipped into a rope, the tension of the rope is paramount. So the tension between each person and then the rope team as a whole. And so if the rope is too tight, you're pulling and you're yanking, and then if it's too loose, then you're stepping on the rope. And if someone falls, then everybody accelerates, and it's really bad. You get yanked off your feet, and it's all bad. So what has to happen from a metaphorical perspective and, a real life perspective on the rope is it has to move along just at the right trajectory. So that takes bandwidth, that takes effort, that takes each person being cognizant of the other pace of the other people, the other pace of the other people on the rope, and checking in with them. You good? Yep, you're good. Okay, we're moving. Do we need to stop? We recalibrate? Yes. Okay. Well then, now are we ready? Yes. And that just happened to me, a few weeks ago in Ecuador. I had a bunch of people who'd never been on a rope. Matter of fact, all of them, none of them had ever been on a rope.
Just for the record, this is a bunch of high school kids, right?
Yeah, mostly, and some parents too. Yeah, so it was a bit of a rite of passage trip that I led for my son, who was just walking around back here. He's a senior in high school here, and him and some of his best buds, who I just feel like such an old guy. But once again, I feel like young kids, there's not enough adversity, right? Like I wanted them to feel the fear of a summit night. I wanted them to feel the uncertainty of the summit night, the darkness, the cold, the scariness, the anticipation of, am I going to be able to do this? That's heavy shit that is really, I think, mission critical for all of us in whatever we do. And so I took them on this trip, and none of these people had ever had crampons or been on a rope before. And so it's a crash course in training, prepping. I like, this is what this is going to look like and feel like. But then you can prep people all day, and then you get up on the side of the hill, and that's when things get real. And so that a month ago, here we are. I'd never climbed this mountain before, interestingly enough. But my Ecuadorian guides, they had downloaded me and compared it to some other mountains that we'd done together. And so, but I was the first person going on all these different rope teams. I was the first person going up through this little channel, and I was like, it was quite spicy, like a little bit spicier than I thought. Like it was a good, 10 to 15 feet of like 70-degree snow.
Yeah.
And I got up in there. I'm like, damn, it was almost a little bit of the Kilimanjaro dynamic.
Yeah.
Got all these kids with me, and so that was one of those turn around and say, listen, this is a don't fuck the dog situation here. We've got to be on point. And if I ever need anything from you right now, it's me asking you, step into this moment and be very in tune with every step and every movement you make. And they all did it. Everybody. It was like, I don't know how many people we had, like 16 people or something, like everybody got up. More importantly, everybody got back down and went down through that little channel and made it, and were safe. And it was just such a cool feedback for me to see you can put people in situations, and generally most people will step into that moment. If you really reinforce as a leader, like, I need the most from you right now.
Right.
I need everything from you right at this moment. I need every single thing that you do to be centered into this moment, because this is the critical moment. And I'm not going to ask this, this isn't a cortisol slam. We're not going to do this for days and weeks and months and years. This is right now. Let's just knuckle down right now, put it all into this moment, and then we'll get it out and we can cruise just a little bit before we have to knuckle down again, just to our point you were talking about.
Yeah.
Only that, like, redline it, and then let's go down to pink, and then let's redline it, and then let's go down to green, and let's cruise. So it's finding those pieces of balance. And I think the kids really did that last month.
That's awesome. I think one of the biggest challenges I think you see in founders, because the founder personality is probably very much like, knowing you and others kind of like you and me and Peter. And the founder personality has a hard time with it, right? It's because it's all go, right? It's like slam the gas down and just leave it down, right? And trying to remind a founder, and I'm the worst with this, right? I'm like biggest culprit. Which is probably why Peter's laughing right now, because but trying to remind myself or any other founder that you gotta back off, right? There are moments where you've got to put it all on the line, like you said. But in order for that to work, there actually have to be more moments that aren't life or death, right? And you've got to be able to kind of get that calibration right, because if your expectation is that everybody is redlined at all moments, it's just the recipe for burnout, right? It's what's happening in healthcare right now. I speak to a lot of healthcare groups, and it is universal, unequivocal, like burnout. And it's because leadership within these organizations in these industries, such as healthcare, they're not understanding that part right. Of, listen, we go hard, and then we can't maintain this unsustainable version of what healthcare is right now. And healthcare is broken in the United States, right? It's absolutely broken. It needs to be just basically just dismantled and start over again. But I just feel for the people, the PAs and the docs and the nurses that are just getting slammed, and the administrators have no sense of what we're talking about right here, which is it's okay. We all want to work hard. There's periods where we have to just absolutely pin it to the wall, and those shifts are hard. And we signed up for that. You got 20 people in the waiting room. It is what it is. But then there's got to be some times when you don't have that, right? Where it's like, you need to be able to enjoy
and coming into work and doing your job and not just feeling stressed all the time. That's not sustainable for ourselves and our sort of how we operate. It's not. I mean, I'm sure some people think that I just want to go. Well, no, good luck, man. You're going to flame out, guarantee it, 100%, not 99, 100%. You're going to flame out.
Yeah.
Right. So, I don't know. I see and hear that now in healthcare, particularly.
It's true. I mean, in our streets, there's this unwritten, I don't know if it still exists, but there used to be this unwritten rule that like you just had to work so hard and so many hours and like dial. And like I think the only way you can make it is if you don't do that, right? If you're doing like weekends every weekend and you for like 2 years, you're human. It's not going to work. Like you're going to fail. If you take your weekend off and ditch the phone, don't look at email, do all that stuff, then you can make it, right?
Yeah.
You can make it.
But see, finding that recipe now, it's hard though, right? Because like all we see is the David Goggins being like, "Go, you gotta slam yourself every night," you know, like just raging with testosterone and cool, that's great, and I know that can work for some demographics, but
at certain times though,
certain times, yes.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of finding that balance, and believe me, I feel like there's, just as we've said, there's starts and stops. There's realizing like you're finding in your 20s, I think, maybe even in your teens, but in your 20s particularly, where that place is. Like I could go really hard for a few days to a few weeks to a few months, maybe even a year if I have to, knowing that time is going to provide me the opportunity to learn enough to be able to appreciate that summit. So but then, as you go through that journey, that lifelong summit, you know, you get older and into the further decades and you realize like, oh, okay, well, you know, now I really do need to take care of myself, every part of myself, because otherwise I'm not going to be an effective leader.
Yeah. I had a friend who was part of a really kind of epic startup, finished. But he used to go on these, like, he's like all out for like months, you know, product release, whatever it was, he was hammering. And then I lived in San Francisco at the time. He would bitch to my house, not tell anyone where he was, turn everything off. He's like, let's go hiking, man. So we go hike and eat sushi and do all this stuff in California. It was a lot of fun. People were like, where is he? He's like off the grid. They can't find him. They start texting me. They know.
Yeah, he's on some ayahuasca journey in San Francisco with you sweating a lot.
Not here, man. I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, don't tell him. Like, he was totally not there. And then he'd be like sleeping in, and you could just see him totally recharged. And then he'd be like, all right, dude, I'm back. I'm out. And right before I get the plane, boom, his phone. He's like, you couldn't like talk to him again. You're like, okay, I see you in the zone, man. I'll catch you on the next side.
Did it make you feel bad at all that, like, for this hard-charging, hardcore guy, you were the guy just to drink beer and eat sushi with? It's like you weren't the guy to like.
Care. I
don't want to go on a mission with him. I just want to drink beer and eat sushi.
Well, I was an investor, so I was happy with the outcome. But
yeah, true.
But I, you know, he was a friend for life for me. You know, I grew up with him, so he was like, we'd like ditch at my house, and just be like. Awesome. People are like, what the hell? Or like people would call, they'd be texting me going, is Gilfus there? I'm like, no, he's not here. Yeah, he's here, man.
That's right.
I can't tell you.
So I think we're pretty much out of time here, but Jeff, just to kind of wrap things up, what's next? You got a couple books out. What are the next adventures? What are the next projects looking like for you here?
You know, I realized, just in the past couple years that I continue to have this really, I think, worthwhile and fruitful syndrome of coming off of one thing and immediately having the next thing planned, right? Because as soon as we got down from Everest, it's immediately like, what's next? Wait a minute, what do you mean what's next? I just took a blind dude to the top of the biggest mountain in the world. Chill out, pump the brakes, bro. I want to hang out on a beach in Thailand for a few days. But that's always been the case. And I've enjoyed that because I think once you get done with a big startup, like somebody's going to be like, okay, cool, to your buddy, like what's next? Because people that, and it's a privilege to be asked that question, right? It is.
Yeah.
It's just like having
sure.
pressure. When you feel pressure, that's a privilege, because that means people expect something from you because you've done stuff like, oh, you've done something. So what's next? Well, what I realized is that I'm okay with sort of coming down from something and chilling a little bit. And, and, you know, I've got like 5 pages of open on my browser on my phone of peaks that I want to climb, that, you know, they only make that list if they're pretty hard to get to. And there would be a little bit of adventure, not crazy, not 8,000 meter peak, not 7,000 meter peaks, 6,000 meter peaks that are just a little more obscure that you've never heard of before. Those are the kind of things that really sort of interest me, while I still am holding on just to a little bit of cartilage in my knees. You know, the connective tissue is still what it needs to be able to go do stuff like that. But, you know, I mean, my kid's 18, he's in his senior year, so it's like, it's hard to imagine wanting to, you know, be gone at all anytime between now and when he graduates. And then the empty nester thing sets in, and I know that you guys know what that's like. And, you know, I think that the wife and I are really pretty excited about that. Maybe we're just saying that to be able to mitigate the sort of, oh my God, our only child is gone kind of thing. You know, but I think that I'm okay with not having the next big thing right in front of me right there now.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's a good perspective to have. I wish I had gotten that advice from you. And my 10-day retirement was
it was short-lived, right? Yeah,
it was short-lived. I think I told you, Jeff, when
you did. Yeah.
You had said, like, I think I had said, I sold the company and I'm retiring. And then I think it was like a week and a half later, you said, what are you doing? I said, I'll start, you know, whatever. So it didn't take. Peter Peter advised me against it. I think you advised me against it. Everybody advised me. There's someday that's advice I'll take.
Idle hands are the devil's work, so you just got to always kind of have something, but it doesn't have to be, here's the bow on it. It doesn't have to be riddled with cortisol. It can be a nice objective that can be like good, hard objective, but not absolutely like, you know, hit you over the head with a bat every day. Right? Yeah. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jeff, how can people reach you if they want, you know, Jeff has spoken to a bunch of our companies, incredible keynote speaker, incredible guy to have around your business on these concepts of the expeditionary mindset, leadership, servant leadership, things like that. How do people reach you?
Well, most people reach out, just be like, the dude that guided the blind dude up Everest. That'll go straight to me. But my website is Jeff B, as in Brian Evans, and all you need is there. And I love, so I really enjoy, as you can tell, I take up every minute of your 60 minutes. We're at 59 minutes now. I love to talk about these topics and really enjoy connecting dots, because it's so, I think, can be, if it's presented well, it's always exciting stuff, but then really like meaningful and relevant content for folks. Yeah.
We, just a real quick plug here. You know, we had Jeff come in and speak at my previous company a couple times. And the first time he ever came in, Peter, you were there. You know, blew everybody away. And, you know, the parallels here, you know, are, I'm not a big guy when it comes to like sports to business parallels. I think stuff is just really overdone a lot, but this is just perfect when you're talking about climbing and that expeditionary mindset as it relates to a startup. And we literally revamped our entire culture of the business around that really came out of Jeff coming in as a keynote speaker, which I attribute so much of the success of that business just to what that did for the, you know, we sort of framed, company name was Outmatch, and we framed everything around this concept of expedition outmatch to be, you know, everybody in the company was on their own expedition, right? Whatever that meant to them.
Yeah.
And it became such a powerful thing within the culture of that business that, you know, it was really profound what it did for the business. So,
as someone who is on the side of that, it was so true that the culture was probably the best I've seen in company in a long time. And those are the ones that are successful. And obviously that was a big piece of what you guys did.
Yep.
That was the culmination. That meeting was like really pushing over.
Yep.
It's really cool to watch.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. Yeah.
Yeah.